Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
Pumped up on Mars, juice, and ketamine.
He is the Thomas Edison plus of our age.
Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy.
I would say 98% really appreciate what he does, but those 2% that are nasty, they are out there in full force.
We are meant for great things in the United States of America, and Elon reminds us of that.
We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, May 27th. I'm Max Chafkin, sitting here with Bloomberg's Elon Musk reporter, Dana Hall. Hey, Dana.
Hey, Max.
And Bloomberg social media reporter, our favorite high school quarterback, Kurt Wagner. Kurt, how are you? How was your Memorial Day?
Hi, Max. It was wonderful. How was yours?
It was good. It was good. So we have a lot to talk about, even though I'd say Elon has been maybe a little bit quieter than usual over the last week. Maybe it was the Memorial Day holiday. So today I want to unpack some of the things that we talked about on our last episode. Last week, as you'll remember if you listened to the podcast, David Papadopoulos and I reacted kind of in real time to Elon Musk's comments in Qatar to Bloomberg's Michal Hussein, saying essentially he was going to spend less money in political contributions. We're getting more indications here. We're getting a little bit of news, including some news from Elon about what's happening, what he has planned. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to talk about X Money, the big new Twitter X credit card. This is the everything app. And we'll get into that next from Kurt. But before we do that, so Elon's future plans, Dana, I feel like we need a new term for this. We need to say, what is this, a sleeping arrangement update? Because Elon went on X and he essentially said that after having spent the last few months sleeping on the floors of the White House or whatever, he's got a new location that he plans to take his rest.
Well, he said he's like laser focused on his companies, right? And I mean, today he's in Brownsville, Texas, where SpaceX is about to launch Starship yet again. But maybe I missed this over the long holiday weekend. Did he give like a bedroom?
Yeah, May 24th, in response to, and we'll get to this with Kurt, to some news out of X, a fire at one of the data centers. He said, back to spending 24/7 at work, sleeping in conference server factory rooms. So apparently sleeping in the server room sounds kind of loud, but in any case, he said, I must be super focused on X, XAI, and Tesla, plus Starship launch next week, as we have critical technologies rolling out, as evidenced by X uptime issues this week, major operational improvements need to be made. Kurt, there was a fire, right? That's what prompted this?
There was. So there was a fire at one of X's data centers near Portland. There was an outage on Saturday for a few hours for a lot of users. I didn't personally experience it, but others did. And it's not entirely clear if the fire and the outage were linked, but the timing is certainly interesting. And then you have, as you pointed out, Max, the comments from Elon basically saying, hey, look, I need to start spending more time here. There's been, a lot of technical issues that I have to deal with. He said there should have been like a failure redundancy that should happen. What that means is that when one of the data centers went down, the other one should have picked up the slack and consumers should not have noticed there was an issue, but that didn't work. And so the fact that he's sitting here saying, hey, look, I need to get back to spending 24/7 on the tech of these companies that I run, I think is a signal that the fire, the data centers, all of this stuff are sort of intertwined.
Yeah, was this a particularly bad one, Kurt? I mean, I did on Friday notice people complaining about it. Maybe my X usage isn't as sort of fanatical as it once was, so I actually didn't personally notice this.
I mean, it was bad enough that people noticed for an extended period of time, which is sort of rare. I cover all these big platforms, Max, as you know, and like it's not uncommon for there to be, hey, 30 minutes, people are having trouble on Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever. When it extends beyond an hour or two is when you start to scratch your head and say, okay, something meaningful happened here. I think Elon's, again, his response to this, acknowledging that backup plan that they had in place essentially did not work, I think to me is a sign that this was, it was worse than average. It wasn't like the X was down for the whole day or something like that, but it was not just a blip, I would say.
Yeah, and Dana, there's been a few of these data points. I mean, you brought up the fact that there's a Starship launch. He's going to have an event, a live stream later today, I believe noon Texas time, talking about Mars. He sort of seems to be trying to focus publicly on the companies, maybe more than the past. Also, May 23rd, just to point you to a couple of other posts, I have come to the perhaps obvious conclusion that accelerating GDP growth is essential. Doge has and will do great work to postpone the day of bankruptcy in America, but the profligacy of government means that only radical improvements in productivity can save the country. It almost sounds like he's declaring failure, right? Like he's sort of saying, it turns out actually Doge didn't do that much. I need to focus on my companies for the good of the country.
I guess I'm very cynical about this messaging because I feel like it's a very convenient narrative for a lot of reporters in Washington, D.C. to be like, Musk is distancing himself. Musk is giving up and going home and taking his ball and focusing back on his companies. And everyone is parroting the message that Musk himself wants to get out. And the reason why he is trying to get this message out is because he really wants Tesla's board to give him a pay package. And, for better or worse, Musk has that kind of messiah complex of I alone can fix it. So now he's like, I've got to deal with this data center issue at X. And we're going to roll out this robotaxi in Austin and we're going to go to Mars. And he's trying to signal to investors that he is focused because the big complaint of investors has been that he was spending too much time on Washington. So I feel like this is a lot for his audience of investors and board members. I mean, he's always kind of micro-focused and multitasked in a way that is sort of unique in corporate America. But is he really giving up on the Doge ambitions? I don't know. He's got all of his people still there. It's is Steve Davis still the COO of Doge? Is Antonio Gracia still at the Social Security Agency? He's got CIOs in place. It's hard for me to imagine him really sort of working so hard in Washington and just abandoning ship. I feel like this is optics more than a real change.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I do think, it's two things could be true. One is he could have less influence in Trump's White House today than he did, I don't know, a month ago. And also he could be more focused on his companies, on a day-to-day basis, and also hardly moving away from politics. He's still very much focused on his influence in Washington. The other thing is, and I brought this up last week, he's going to this Bloomberg event in Qatar or dialing into the event and saying he's sort of spending less money on politics, but in the same breath saying he's going to the White House that week. We saw him at the White House with the South African president. Kurt, X was kind of in the favored position before it was Doge. Has X suffered? You kind of see it going, one of two ways, but how have things worked at the company as Elon Musk's attention sort of turned away from it?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that he's been quite absent, which makes a lot of sense, right? As we've talked about, he not only has 4 other businesses, but that he's also, full-time, half-time, part-time, whatever in DC. I look at the Doge thing and Elon and X more as what does this mean for the business of the company? Not so much even his personal time, which is that I think in January and February, when he's tweeting constantly, when he's hanging out with Trump, when he's literally sort of dictating U.S. policy via his Twitter account or his X account, I think that gave X this continued influence, right? You kind of had to pay attention to it still because it was still driving literal U.S. policy decisions via his X account. As Elon has, the last month or two, he has stopped tweeting as much about politics. He's obviously saying he's going to step away from politics. And so what I wrote last week in our newsletter was sort of what happens to X if Elon truly follows through and steps away from politics? Because he spent the last year turning this thing into a political machine. The purpose of X, for the most part, was to get Donald Trump elected and then to support his agenda and possibly push his agenda in the ways that Elon wants it to. And if that's not what he's going to do anymore, like, what is X, right? It's not really a place for breaking news. It's not really a place for the global conversation like it has historically been, because Elon pivoted so aggressively into politics a year ago. And so I don't know. I'm sort of kind of sitting around wondering, like, what does this platform become if it's not a Donald Trump, Elon Musk politics machine? I don't know if you two have both been on it for years as well. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that, but like, what's the identity of this thing now? It keeps morphing, and I think the political identity that he's created is sort of crumbling as we're standing here.
I don't know. I don't really use X anymore. I lurk on it, but like, I locked my account and I don't have it on my phone, and I kind of like check in like every once in a while, but like, I don't use it. It is not the platform that I joined over a decade ago.
Well, I for one am still addicted, although, Kurt, to your point, I do think it loses some of its vitality. We will, in the second segment, talk a little bit about, possible future identity for X as a bank. Before I get there, I mean, there is a swirl of things, right? It's not just the fact that Doge hasn't cut as much, maybe as promised. It's not just the fact that there are fires breaking out in Twitter data centers and Twitter is going down. It is also, of course, Tesla and the fact that the sales are still, despite Elon Musk's comments. Elon Musk said last week, yeah, Europe's bad for us, but it's bad for everyone. Although there's a report today essentially showing that Tesla sales are way down by more than 50%, while overall EV sales in the region are up 28%. Dana, one thing I've wondered about, we've talked about the demand thing, but if you look in that one big beautiful bill, the Trump budget bill, it is not a great bill for Tesla. And like the combination of Tesla's sales and this kind of potential hit to the revenue in the form of this budget bill, which takes away or would take away EV tax credits. Do you think that could be pushing him away?
I don't know. I mean, Elon has always sort of said that he doesn't think there should be any subsidies whatsoever, whether it's for EVs or oil and gas. So I don't know if that alone is enough to make him angry or cause some kind of rift with Trump. I think that tariffs are not good for Tesla. But like fundamentally, like what he cares the most about is SpaceX, and he wants funding for a Mars mission. So I don't know if he's willing to jettison one for the other. But the other thing I'd point out about the European sales is that like Tesla has a factory in Germany that makes the Model Y. If these sales in Europe continue to crater, there's going to be real questions about like, do they keep this factory open, or like, do they start scaling back production? Like, you don't keep making cars for a market that does not need them. And everyone always sees the problems in Europe as like, oh, Elon being so close to Trump. But it's really like, it was really Elon Musk supporting the AfD in Germany that has caused this huge backlash in Europe. Like, European consumers are very concerned about what Elon is doing with vis-a-vis European politics, Trump aside.
Last thing, this SpaceX launch, Dana, what are you going to be looking for here? Like, he's saying that 2026, right? That's the goal for like some kind of Mars demonstration mission. Do you have any sense of how far away we are from that in terms of milestones that have to be hit? It to me, from the outside, it seems like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very ambitious, very aggressive timeline. And Musk's plan is that, like, not only will Starship launch to Mars in 2026, but Optimus is going to be on board. So he has a lot riding on this. And we'll hear from him later today when he gives this, speech about Mars. I mean, he's always talked about going to Mars, but now Starship does exist. They've had a couple of launches that haven't totally gone well. And so, like, there's a lot riding on this one going better. I think obviously he wants to show to Trump and to NASA that like this vehicle is ready and that like it can do all the things that it's supposed to do. But, they're constantly tweaking with the heat shield and, there's all kinds of issues that they still work out. And I think in the world of space, everyone will say space is hard and you learn by doing and you iterate, and like what we might see as quote unquote failure is actually just part of the design, iteration, engineering, learning process. So SpaceX has always been very good at that. But I mean, the window to go to Mars, it doesn't come around very often. So that's like a big reason why he is pushing for this 2026 date.
So in our first segment, Kurt talked about kind of like what X becomes. And I think that is a big question. That's an open question. Of course, last week we talked about XAI and this potential deal that it had with Kalshi, which is a predictions company. You know, hours after we recorded that episode, Kalshi actually did a 180, pulled the announcement on the XAI deal, essentially saying that that X had not confirmed the announcement or something like that. So it sounds like some sort of either miscommunication or sort of a 180. That business is up in the air. But Kurt, the business that I think feels actually a little bit easier to get your arms around, if not necessarily, I don't know, the most promising, is money, right? The idea that Elon Musk has talked about for years that he's going to turn X, Twitter, into a bank.
Yeah, and he has been talking about this. I was thinking about this just last night as I was preparing to chat about it. It was October of 2022 that he first, took over Twitter and was like, we're going to turn this thing into a bank. He was telling employees that from the get-go. It's been almost 3 years, Max. We're summer of 2025 now, I think we can say, after Memorial Day. And we still haven't seen anything other than sort of some hints, some teases that something might be coming. And the idea here, I think, to your point, is easy enough to wrap your head around. I think the execution is another thing. And then the adoption is actually, in my opinion, probably the toughest hurdle for them to get over. But let's talk just briefly about what this looks like. I mean, imagine opening your X account and having a balance there, right? Like essentially your debit card, your account, your debit account right there linked to your X account. Now, if I want to send you money, Max, I could shoot you money similar to Venmo. If I'm scrolling through my X feed and I see an ad for something I want to buy, I could click and I could buy it right there. He had talked about having a really high interest yield on the money that's in these accounts. So you'd be incentivized to essentially use this as like a savings account because you'd be making, who knows how much, but we'll say 3, 4, 5% on that money. So that is the idea, is like your X account and your financial accounts are linked together. And what would that do for you? Now, as we're now learning, it's been almost 3 years. They haven't launched anything. So technologically, this is clearly harder than they anticipated. I think they're running into some regulatory issues. They're trying to get licensed for payments in all 50 states. I believe they're in 41 states. But you don't want to roll out a product when, if someone in New York, for example, where they're not licensed, can't send money to someone in California. Like it doesn't really work all that well if you don't have all 50 states. And then the last thing is just adoption. Is the average X user going to actually move their money from a Chase or a Bank of America or something like that and store it in X? And I think that's just an incredibly, incredibly high bar for a consumer to do.
Dude, I don't trust X with my jokes, let alone my, let alone my life savings. But that said, there will be people, and I should just say the reason we're talking about this, so, Elon Musk as often is kind of driving this with posting on X. A Tesla owners group tweeted that X Money was launching soon, X Money being this financial service offered by the company formerly known as Twitter. Elon wrote on May 25th, so I believe that was on Sunday, this will be a very limited access beta at first. When people's savings are involved, extreme care must be taken.
I don't want my bank account to be in beta. Sorry. I just don't, I just would never want my personal finances to be in beta mode at an Elon Musk company like that. I mean, there's already enough problems as it is with just security of data in this new world of, hackers and the internet and online banking in general. I don't know. I'm very old school with my banking and would not willfully share my banking contacts with a social media platform, particularly one that's AI based and trying to use information to train their algorithms.
We're joking about this because, of course, the fail whale and Twitter, as Kurt knows well, he wrote a book about Elon's takeover of Twitter, Battle for the Bird. This is a company that has sort of, for its entire history, had technical problems, even dating back to Elon. It definitely doesn't convey trusted, secure. It's more freewheeling. Anything could happen. It's pretty much all the things you don't associate with a bank. On the other hand, Kurt, I mean, you talked about the regulatory progress that they've made. There was also this report that I believe you wrote about back in January, Musk essentially striking a deal with Visa that would make Visa a payments partner of X. I mean, what is in place right now outside of the sort of regulatory issue that you talked about?
Yeah, so I believe they have licenses secured in 41 states. So again, that's just sort of bare bones. You need that in order to operate in those states to send money to other people or to businesses. So they're working their way through that. The Visa thing, my understanding of that is, you would have some type of card that is linked to your account. So like a debit card, for example, that you could literally go out into the real world and walk into a store and buy something with this card. And so in order to do something like that, Max, you need partners who do debit cards or credit cards, and Visa would make sense there. They're going to need banking partners, right? They're going to need, we know some of them, which of course I can't recall off the top of my head, but we know some of them via their payments applications documents that we've gotten from some of these states. We've done FOIA requests to try and get those applications to get a better sense of what it is that they're doing. This will only work if they are partnering with other financial services providers, Visa being one. And then once you get all of that stuff in place, you need to convince actual people to do this. And we've talked about how that's going to be a problem. But, a Visa, that's a well-known name. That's a household name. That's a good sign for them that they have partnered with someone that people are familiar with and who know. But I think that's sort of table stakes when it comes to your money, right? Like, you're not going to sit there and be like, wow, Visa, this is incredible. You're going to be like, yeah, that's what I expect. Like, if I'm going to be giving you my money, I expect to have household names involved. And so they are, to their credit, kind of getting that. But I think that, again, is sort of the bare minimum at this point.
What is the model for this? Is this what Weibo does? Like, is there payments on some of the apps in China? Because I feel like Musk is very aware of what consumer behavior is in China. And there must be, like, even though this might be going back to the early PayPal days, like this idea of making X the everything app, is that modeled on something that already exists elsewhere in the world?
I think everyone always points to WeChat in China, this idea of, having entertainment, banking, social networking, all shopping, all in one location. The issue and why I'm pretty skeptical that this is going to work is that several companies, including Meta and Mark Zuckerberg, have attempted to do this already in the US without success. And I think sort of the conclusion that I've come to from having spoken with people about this over the years is that the US market is just so fragmented already that the idea of sort of putting it all back together feels almost impossible, right? Like, you go to Uber when you want a ride, and you go to your banking app when you want to bank, and you go to X or Meta or TikTok or whatever when you want a social network. And I think the consumer behavior is just so different in the US than it was in China. And in China, it's controlled more, right? Like the government can basically control which companies, get market share or can sprout up. And so it's just not the case here. And so I'm pretty skeptical this is going to happen, in part because this is an idea I've probably been writing about for like 10 years in the US specifically, and it just hasn't come to fruition.
Facebook is way, way bigger than X. Like, so you're starting with a much smaller base of users, that are not as addicted to it as people are of Facebook. Like, it's just a much weaker position, in addition to like all the market challenges we talked about, as well as the political challenges. There is one little wrinkle. I've seen a couple of reports suggesting that when Elon Musk creates this X credit card, you will be able to print your Twitter username on it.
Wow. Okay.
I think that could change everything, Kurt, because,
throw out everything I've said to this point and let's start from zero. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, sure. That sounds like something that would happen. I feel like that's like the X premium subscriber perk, right? That lures people into their $8 a month. I'm picturing you taking the team out to the local, Buffalo Wild Wings after a taping and throwing down that Visa card.
Okay, so we just got through Memorial Day, 2025. We're, a third of the way through, a little more than that. But I wanted to look ahead to next year. And we've been talking about all of these things that Elon Musk is trying to do, the reasons why he wants to sleep on the floor, sleep in the factory or whatever. What I'd like Kurt and Dana, what I'd like you both to do is sort of rank these from most likely to succeed to least likely to succeed by the end of 2026, so by the end of next year. So the list goes a functioning fleet of robotaxis. Tesla's trying to do that. X Money surpassing one of the big mobile payment apps in usage by the end of 2026. Or third, Optimus, that's Tesla's humanoid robot, heading on a Starship rocket to Mars by the end of next year. Kurt Wagner, what's the most likely of those?
Oh, man, I knew you were going to pick me first. Least likely is probably a full functioning fleet of robotaxis, just because I think that's actually the most likely of those, like long term probably, but
by
the end of 2026 I'm just not sold. I'll say the second least likely is X payments, as we've talked about. I've already shared why I'm pretty skeptical that's going to take off. And then I'm going to say the most likely is the sending Optimus to Mars, and it's purely because of the window that Dana mentioned earlier, how there's sort of like limited windows that you can send these ships on their way to Mars. And so I think, Elon will, again, I don't think any of these things are very likely, but I guess of the three, I would say maybe that one's the most likely, simply because it has that time pressure built in of trying to hit that window. So don't play this tape again at the end of 2026. Let's burn this one after this.
I agree, because I think also of all of the things, Elon cares the most about Mars. Like, Mars has been the animating force of his life for over 2 decades. And for whatever criticism you might have of Elon, he's like, what do they call it? Like a forcing function. Like, he will bring the full force of his personality and his ambition, and he will drive his team to meet that deadline, because it is a window. And Optimus exists and is walking around, and who knows if it's teleoperated or not, but I don't think there's anything stopping them from putting a couple of Optimus robots on a ship and trying to send it to Mars. Whether they get to Mars remains to be seen, but I think that they will do everything in their power to meet that deadline. And as we've talked about before, President Trump mentioned it in his inauguration speech, and I think that is really the main thing that Elon has always cared about.
Okay, you guys are wrong. The most likely is the payment thing, because that's only one of the three that could conceivably happen. And I don't know that X Money can really take on Venmo or Zelle or Apple Pay or Square. But to me, you never know. There are no technological barriers to that one succeeding. That one is just purely about perceptions about Elon Musk. And maybe, I feel like it's a comment on how difficult his position has gotten politically that we have trouble picturing it, because I do agree it's hard to imagine. I would say that the second most likely is the robotaxi fleet, only because I think there's a lot of squishiness in that term, and I could see defining it in a way where Elon would allow himself to declare victory. I don't buy Optimus getting to Mars by 2026, guys. I feel like it's going to be tough. They got to refuel the thing. They're 8 zillion steps there. And Dana, does Optimus actually work, or have we seen some videos? I don't know. I don't know if I've seen enough Optimus here to trust him on another planet.
Oh, come on. Optimus is going to be babysitting your kid and doing ballet and playing the piano. Come on.
New nickname for Max, the Contrarian. That's Max's new nickname.
Listen, I'm going to sign up for X Money right now, get that credit card out, start buying you guys things, and before you know it, Cash App,
single-handedly push your prediction over the finish line. I think that's a good idea.
Kurt, Dana, thanks for being here.
As always.
Thank you, Max.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Anna Mazarakis is our editor. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Dave Purcell fact-checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks to our supporters, Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm Max Chafkin. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us, and we will see you next week.